Hello, it's Amy. I'm here with the next video in my series of videos on the Journal of Emily Shore, which was published initially in 1891. Now, if you watched the first video, I read through the introduction and said I would be back to begin on chapter 1, which is the start of the journal entries. So that's what we're doing here today. We're going to start in on chapter 1, which begins when Emily was 11 years old. And it begins on the 5th of July, 1831. And she's writing from Brook House, Broadstairs, Ramsgate, Brook House, and Woodbury over the course of these journal entries in the first chapter. So she says, "Our family consists of Papa, Mama, and 5 children. Papa is curate during part of the year for Mr. Cust, rector of Cockney, Hatley, a little village 2.5 miles from us. We live at Potton, a little market town on the confines of Bedfordshire and Cambridgeshire. Papa takes pupils. His greatest number is 6. Potton is 4 miles from the post town of Biggleswade on the North Road. The nearest adjoining villages to Potton are Hatley Cockney or Cockney Hatley, 2.5 miles distant. Rustlingworth, about the same distance. Gamlingay, about 3 miles. Everton, 2.5 miles. Sutton, scarcely 1 mile. And much the prettiest of them all, and Sandy, 4 miles. The nearest gentlemen's places are those of Mr. Pym, whose place is called the Hassles near Sandy, Mr. Astles at Everton, and Captain Foley at the little hamlet of Tentworth in the parish of Everton. Also Woodbury in the parish of Gamlingay, an estate of Mr. Wilkinson's. There is, or rather was, that of Sutton, a manor of Sir John Burgonye's, but he does not inhabit it himself, and in the time of the last tenant, Mr. Russell, the house was burnt down by accident. The estate is now going to ruin, apparently. The park is a very pretty one, with some fine old oaks. It is on the Biggleswade Road, which is decidedly the prettiest about Potton. The principal persons in Potton, besides Papa and Mr. Whittingham, the vicar, are Mr. Keel and Mr. Moore, surgeons, Mr. Yowd, a wool merchant, and Mr. Smith, a rich farmer. Potton contains no less than 13 public houses, besides beer shops. There is a market every Saturday, a statute and horse fair once a year, and occasionally a show of wild beasts. The church is ordinary in appearance, but contains some architectural curiosities. Potton is famous for fires. About 40 years ago, it was almost entirely burnt down, and 4 cottages were destroyed by fire last year. It contains about 1,500 inhabitants. Our house in Potton is called Brook House. It stands just outside the town, in front of a little brook or ditch. In the spring of 1831, we were all 5 of us taken ill at once with the most dreadful fever, and were all very dangerously ill. When we were all recovered in some degree, so as to be able to walk, and were nearly as strong as in health, Papa and Mama determined to take us to Broadstairs to spend the summer holidays by the seaside. And so that, I'm just seeing we're getting a date here of July 5th, so I'm assuming this little bit is sort of the preface that she put at the start of her journal as an explanation, which is very interesting because I don't think I've seen that before, certainly not in the journal of an 11-year-old who gives such accurate details of exactly where they were and why. But now we're moving into the July 5th date. We took the coach to London and filled it inside and out with ourselves and 3 servants. The road to London is in some parts very pretty. At about 1 o'clock we entered London and put up at the Spread Eagle, Gracechurch Street. We first went to see the new London Bridge. This bridge is very beautiful, but not yet completed. It is of white stone and consists of very wide semicircular arches thrown across the Thames just above the old bridge, which is a heavy, ugly fabric. We were likewise much pleased with the Thames itself, which is filled with vessels of all kinds. The monument And monument is capitalized here, so it's in reference to a specific monument. The monument is very near. It looks immensely tall, but we did not ascend it. And this is where I wish there were, footnotes in this edition, because I'm interested, what exactly this monument is. I would assume it's probably still there. And perhaps, British or English readers picking this up would know exactly what she means by the monument in London, but I do not. But she says it looks immensely tall. They did not ascend it. I have read of a man getting over the rails at the top and throwing himself over. He was dashed to pieces. I believe he was insane. I do not much like the urn at the top of the monument. It is very ugly. We next went to see St. Paul's Cathedral, which I admire extremely. The exterior is too immense for me to see correctly enough to describe, but when we entered it, it was most beautiful. The pavement is black and white marble, as well as the whole interior. I have, however much I admire the building, two objections to our adopting the Grecian architecture, or rather the Roman. One is that there is nothing like an arch in pure Grecian. The other is that there ought to be more than one story of columns, which does not look at all well. The dome is immense. Papa took Richard and me up to the Whispering Gallery, which extends round it, and looks down into the church. Everybody in the church looks like dolls or monkeys from it. It was so high up. The dome is covered with paintings by Sir James Thornhill, representing the life of St. Paul. They are very ill done. So you can see, even at 11 years old, she has some strong opinions about architecture and the quality of art. I don't think at 11 years old I was, thinking that critically about things. But onward. On leaving the Whispering Gallery, we went some 100 steps higher to a large stone gallery extending all round the outside of the dome. From thence we had a view of a great part of London, and the tops of the highest churches appeared a vast distance beneath us. We went no higher than this, but descended after we had walked round it. I had not much time to examine the monuments. There were some by Flaxman and others by Banks and Bacon. I also remember two representing Admiral Nelson and Lord Cornwallis. After seeing St. Paul's, we went to the little church of St. Stephen's, Wallbrook, which is admired all over Europe. It is completely enclosed by buildings, and actually an odious little cobbler's stall is built up against the steeple. There is nothing remarkable outside, but the interior, though small, is very elegant and beautifully proportioned. The carving on the dome and on the capitals of the pillars is rich. What I believe Richard admired the most of all was a picture as large as life, representing the stoning of St. Stephen, painted by West, whom Richard adores, but whom I do not much love. And the picture in question does not increase my admiration of him, for the design is cold and tame, the drawing lifeless and without spirit, and the coloring sufficiently bad. And we move on to July 6th. The country about Margate, Broadstairs, and Ramsgate is odious. The soil is chalky, scarce a tree is to be seen, and a hill would be a wonder. The cliffs of chalk have not a broken edge anywhere, and are perfectly the same for miles, extending all along the coast like white walls, as Papa says. And indeed, the similitude is very apt. The journey was hot, dusty, and fatiguing. We did not see the sea all the way till we came to Broadstairs, and then indeed it broke most beautifully on our sight, of the brightest blue and perfectly calm. What struck me very much was the way in which it seemed to rise so very high, and extending before us to such an immense distance. The white sails of vessels at a distance look also very beautiful. Broadstairs is a small town. Mamma describes it by saying that it has not enough company to make it lively, but it has too much to make it retired. To remind us that it is but a child who writes, we insert the following. And that's in brackets, so that would be the editors of this work. So in this case, I believe, her sisters. After arriving, we had a run on the sands. Then we took our tea, arranged the house, and soon after went to bed. The first thing Mackworth did on his arrival was to get Edward, the footman, to go over the town with him and buy a little wooden ship, worth 6 pence, or properly nothing at all. Papa told him that whereas he had sixpence on this good-for-nothing ship, Edward would have made a much better one for nothing, for be it known that Edward is very clever in such little works of ingenuity. It may be worthwhile to relate the end of this memorable vessel. In a few days it was stripped of all its rigging, and was then used to throw into the sea and take out again. On returning from Broadstairs, it still existed, and was tied by a string to the boat which conveyed us to the packet, following the said boat stern foremost. Lastly, having safely gone through the dangers of the voyage, it was lost in the inn when it came to London. And this is about 10 minutes, 11 minutes long, so maybe we'll leave it at that length. And I will return again soon with the next entry for July 7th, 1831.